I understand.
Right.
Believe
I think she has.
Everybody likes those
5 children.
explained in your
Pregnant.
resolutions and shit. That's wrong.
Oh.
He lives in Crystal Lake.
Is a good example.
We have quorum.
I think you're the Nespresso is better than the cake.
No,
Lots are the same frozen.
and my parents have a cake shop and really, you guys really want to keep buying those? Like,
Yeah, he sits over there anyway.
All right, everybody. Hi, good afternoon.
It's in your seat.
come to this side, Ron.
This is my seat.
And Chris is in my.
Join us on this side, Ron.
Chairman, we have problems here.
All right, everybody moved and sit in somebody else's seat today.
I already did.
I'm gonna sit with Mike, so he doesn't feel by himself.
There you go.
He tags over there, so.
Yeah, I can see that.
Coffee's on the way. It'll come in a few minutes, freshly made,
5
too,
hours.
which is nice.
Cash no out.
Not for me.
All right, so,
Oh, look at, today must be a shoe day. You
Look
can
at-
see
now we got-
Bubs's shoes.
Got your high heels on?
Michelle, you've got
That's when-
competition.
Later on.
Big
yes.
girl, the Skechers.
Yeah, you do.
Look at this.
She found the red slippers.
Where's my camera?
All right.
Oh, oh.
Ready?
Sweet.
Sit next to each other.
I think
I
she meant,
agree. I mean, pretty basic. actually.
Too much bling
Too much bling on one
in one
side.
location.
the Italian,
It's a lot of.
nice.
All right, and we see Miss Mosser has got good looking boots on too.
Yes.
Takes a picture. I don't know if I have any good pens. I got all these.
So let us begin. It is now about 3:03, and I'd like to bring this special meeting of the county board to order, please. It's Monday, October 23rd. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Did you want to allow Ellen in? Well,
Yeah, then after.
Bates. Here. Berman. Doherty.
Here.
Davis. Ford.
Board present.
Gums.
Here,
Bakewell. Juby.
should be here.
Kenyon.
Here.
Caius.
Highest present.
Leonard.
Leonard here.
Lewis. Linder.
Linda here.
Melina.
Melina present.
Roth.
Roth here.
Sanchez.
Sanchez present.
Silva.
Silva is here.
Strathman. Strathman here. Surges. Tarver.
Tarver's here.
Tepe.
Up here.
Williams.
Williams present.
Young.
Young here.
Okay, Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Very good. And I'd like to see if you will allow Ms. Allen, Mr. Doherty, and Ms. Lewis a remote attendance for a variety of different reasons.
Make it so.
Agreement?
Number one.
Yes. Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Sturgis has just walked into the room.
Oh, thank God.
This is Alan, and thank you for allowing attendance by remote.
Absolutely. Mr. Sturgis, don't sit down. Please lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we go forward, I'd like to just have a moment of, everybody has their own way of praying. I'm sure you have heard that this morning there was a serious injury to one of our deputies, Brian Anderson. And I'd like everybody just to say a few words to wish him good health, quick recovery, and hopefully his family will be able to sustain his injuries and the feelings that they have. So just a few minutes, please. Thank you. They take very good care of us, and they put their life on the line all the time. They have all of our deepest respect. And we do everything we can to make sure that they have the tools necessary to continue their job safely. So we have no minutes to approve. And I am not aware of any public comment at this point. Very good. So this is going to be a discussion. I would like we can set up some ground rules because I'd like everybody to participate. Questions will be asked. I basically am going to be turning this meeting over to Kathy Hopkinson, and we may, I don't know, Kathy, if maybe Kathy, there's going to be a lot of questions. You're going to be standing for most of the meeting. If you'd like, why don't you come? There's an empty seat here. Come on up. And Mr. Shepro, if you can maybe just sit up on the top row and let Kathy join us. That way she's not gonna have to stand for the next hour and a half. I would like everybody to, obviously, if you have a question and you have another question to follow up, which is on the same line, let's restrict it to 2, no more than 2. And then we can go around, not limiting yourself just to 2 questions, but just to that specific topic. Because otherwise it may take a long time to get all your answers and other people may not have an opportunity to speak. So I want to make sure that the whole board has this ample opportunity. And then as we get through after point 2, we're going to take a small break. We have a special treat that's in the back room that you can go get if you want. If you want, it's homemade treat. And then we can come back to our seats and resume our conversation with a little bit of a little fancy taste in our mouth, I think. So thanks to Mr. Young. So why don't we begin? And Kathy, I'll just help facilitate.
Okay, and I have a very brief presentation. Get that up on the 2024 budget. So the budget will be presented on Wednesday with all the resolutions. Today is just a
I
high
think
level.
whoever's your socks and underwear is more basics. Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please.
I'd have to point it back at me.
Here we go. The general fund, which is the fund that we always have trouble balancing. So the budget is done. We're printing it now. The total appropriation for the general fund for 2024 is $122,418,212, which is $779,000 less than last year's budget, which is 123 million. What are some of the highlights on the revenue side? So this budget that we're going to be presenting on Wednesday, which is, I think, why this discussion is happening today, includes a property tax increase of 2.4 million in the general fund, which is 4.9% over the levy last year, which is under the PTEL limit. It includes 6.2 million in RTA sales tax revenues, which would be, the county board would authorize the reallocation of the RTA sales tax funds from the transportation department. So moving what the general fund currently receives as 10%, moving it to 35%. So an increase of 25%. And transfers of 185,000 and 111,000 from the public safety RTA fund and the judicial technology RTA fund. Those funds, those amounts represent amounts that were not budgeted. The revenues were budgeted and they did not budget expenses for those amounts. So we would just transfer those amounts into the general fund. And at the end of the day, we would be using 3.4 million of our reserves to balance the general fund. On the expense side, this budget includes the 3% wage increase. It includes the equity adjustments. It includes all vacant positions. Since we last spoke, we had another reduction coming from the sheriff's office. If you recall, the sheriff had reduced his adult corrections wage line item by about $1 million. We were looking at the detainee medical cost line item. And since the number of detainees has now dropped below 300, there's less inmates. We reduced the budget by $1.2 million for detainee medical cost. And that was not just a random number. It was also based on, we looked at the 5-year history of medical costs, and it's right in line, reducing the amount from 4.5 to $3.3 million. So this is just, it's probably going to be very hard to see. You'll see all the printouts shortly. We're running, like I said, we're running all the worksheets now, but top line categories 2023 budget to 2024 property tax. This is again just the general fund. Property taxes are up. Other taxes are up because we're moving the RTA sales tax monies into that fund. Licenses and permits just about flat. Grants, not a big change. Charges for services going down. That's something that a lot of the departments have been talking about, that their fee revenue is going down. Fines up a little bit. Reimbursements about flat. Interest revenue is up. And the other revenue, that big change of 3 million, that represents the use of fund balance. And the transfers in in last year's budget, we transferred in money from these excess reserve funds. And this year we would just be using the fund balance. And on the expense side, the salaries and wages are up. Benefits are down. We, which is surprising, we put together the benefit budget a little differently this year. We went person by person based on what they currently have. So we think that's a pretty good number, and it's actually a little bit lower, believe it or not. And that includes benefits that we budgeted for all the vacant positions. Contractual services are flat. Commodities are up. Commodities are down. Capital, there's hardly any capital in the general fund. And then transfers out that basically represents debt service that we have to pay, which we have debt service payments scheduled for at least 10 years.
Why does that say 0
Where's?
for debt service?
Oh, it's in the general fund. We transfer the money out of the general fund and we send it to a debt service fund, and then the debt service fund pays the debt. So here's all your tax levies. The tax levies that we would be increasing would be for the general fund only and the Veterans Commission. The insurance liability, Illinois Municipal Retirement, FICA, Social Security, we had to use a little fund balance to balance the funds. We had to use reserves, essentially. For IMRF, the rate is actually down this year compared to last year. But we still needed to use a little bit of reserves to balance the fund. And then all the other levies are for all the special service areas. So on Wednesday, you will be seeing levies for each one of these items, all the county funds, then all the special service area funds. And I will let you know that Mill Creek Special Service Area, there, I need to adjust the slide for that. Mill Creek is going to be requesting a tax levy that is going to exceed the PTEL limit. So we're going to have a representative here from Mill Creek who's going to speak to that. And we will need to do a truth and taxation hearing. And this county board does approve the tax levy for Mill Creek. I actually need to change that slide. It should be over 900,000 for Mill
Hold
Creek.
on just a second. I think we have a
If we
question.
have a little question, can we answer, or are we
Sure.
supposed
No,
to? wait
no,
till the end?
why don't you- a little question, yes.
Okay, little question.
absolutely.
So a few years back, there was Surges. A few years back, there was a big hullabaloo about what I perceived to be the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund and how we had to raise based on their computations. It would seem that this would be the appropriate time, since interest rates are way high, that we should see not only that coming back, but we should be below where it was before. Do you know, is that like a falsehood, or are we even closer?
Well,
Did I even say it correctly?
so our rate has been going down for the, we have the regular IMRF and then the sheriff's law enforcement personnel IMRF. So we have two different rates and they're wildly different rates. The regular IMRF rate is now under 5%. I can't remember. It's like 4.93. I will come with that number exact on Wednesday. And the sheriff's law enforcement personnel is much higher. It's something like 18 or 19%. But
Bill Leonard,
It's-
did I say that right? Are you tracking with am I even?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
go
understand what you're saying. I think Kathy does too.
right, so the rate that we applied to our salaries to come up with what we pay has been going down each year for the last several years. Yes,
Yeah, it's good.
Yes.
It's good.
That's good. Yes, thank you.
yes. This is just, I just put this slide in here. It's the same slide that I had at the last presentation where I talked about 2.8. And the reason why it's now 2.5 is that the tax extension numbers have changed. And literally about an hour ago, I got an email that the tax extension numbers have changed again. So I need to check them when I go back.
Was that per household?
The tax that is the, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say tax extension, the EAV, the equalized assessed valuation numbers have changed again.
Oh,
I know from working on this that the new general homestead exemption increase up to $8,000 and the senior homestead exemption increase up to $8,000. They were still processing it through the system because it was a new change. And so that is bringing down the EAV for purposes of doing the tax extension. So the EAV number that I received about 2 weeks ago has slightly changed again.
okay, because the senior exemptions are reducing the amount of fee in the EA. Okay. Amount of value.
Yeah.
Okay.
So special revenue funds, the total appropriation is 271 million. The highlights, just going to focus on the big highlights. Since the RTA sales tax fund would be reallocated, this is my proposal for the budget for your consideration. We would reallocate 25% of the RTA sales tax revenue from transportation to the general fund. So that would reduce transportation by 6.2 million. To backfill that or to make KDOT whole, so to speak, we would increase the local option motor fuel tax from 4.7 cents to 8 cents. And that resolution will be in your packet tonight. It wasn't in the original. We had a placeholder in the agenda. The tax would go into effect July 1st, 2024. There's only 2 points during the calendar year that we can increase the tax rate, and we literally just missed one. So the next time that the rate can possibly be increased is July 1st. So that would be 5 months of revenue for transportation instead of 12 months next year at 2.9 million. But annualized, it would be 7.1 million, actually a little bit more than what is being reallocated to the general fund. And since transportation has the most cash of all the funds in the county, they are the beneficiary of most of the interest, or probably over 30% of the interest that's earned in the county. The interest earned would also help fund the capital expenses of transportation.
And just point of clarification, it's not on the dollar, that tax, it's on the gallon.
On the gallon.
Question.
Yes, yes, of course.
Roth here. Is that the limit that we can raise in the county is 8%?
Yes, it's 8%, but as of
8
just
8
cents.
cents, I should say.
8 cents.
Yeah.
I keep doing that. But as of 2020, the state changed the law, the local option motor fuel tax law. It is now tied to the consumer price index. So the county board here can only raise it up to 8, but it can continue increasing over time. So this county board has only ever raised it to 4. It got to 4.7 because since 2020, every year, the state is applying the consumer price index, and it went from 4 to 4.1, 4.1 to 4.4, 4.4 to 4.7. DuPage raised theirs to 8 cents. I don't know how long ago, but their motor fuel tax rate right now is 9%. Because it's 9 cents.
9
Oh,
cents.
this is like, yeah, someone.
That's right.
Yes. So theirs is 9 cents right now because it's tied to the consumer price index, and it'll keep going up. Boy, this looks not very clear to see. So this slide looks better up there, is just a forecast of reserves, because that's one of the items that we're talking about today is the reserves. And we do have a resolution on Wednesday to combine the reserve accounts into one reserve. But if you follow me through this sort of a multi-year forecast here, and it's very important to also know that the general fund is the primary source of money for all the capital projects that are done. So a week and a half ago at the admin committee meeting, Roger Fonstock presented a 5-year capital plan of $41 million. All of that comes from the general fund, unless we have, some other grant or some other source of revenue. But traditionally, historically, it comes from the general fund. However, for this year, for 2024's budget, we are not transferring any funds from the general fund to the capital projects fund. It's a very tight general fund budget. So if you apply our 90-day target, as of today, we have $58 million in reserves. A forecast through the end of the year for the general fund is that that excess would be down to 51 million because the forecast currently is that our expenses in the general fund are going to exceed our revenues. For our 2024 budget, we're budgeting a $3.5 million use of reserves. For 2025, we are including $8.2 million in capital projects expenses and just a rounded number of a budgetary increase of 5 million. And then year after year, additional funding of capital projects and additional just annual expected increases in the general fund budget. And without any other sources of new revenue, you can see that we basically eat through all of our reserves all of our excess reserves. That is, by 2027.
Sturgis question.
Yes.
Yep.
Kathy, when we say Roger is presented an $8 million,
41 million.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Is that, do we have a listing of those? Is that just encapsulated to the birthing committee for that?
Yeah, he handed it out at the admin committee.
Okay.
I don't know if it's in the packet. I think he just presented it. I have a hard copy of it. But he handed out a 5-year capital plan. For 2024, it's 11.6 million. 2025, it's 8.2, then 8, then 7.3, then 6, for a total just over 5 years. And these are all of your pavement improvements, the chillers, boiler replacements, furniture, fire panel upgrades, lighting, all of those sorts of projects.
At some point
There's-
during the budget process, is there an expectation, and maybe not, for the 24-member panel to be reviewing this and helping to categorize that, or not categorize, rank that? Or is this in that committee, it comes here, it is what it is? What are your thoughts on that?
So the 2024 column is what's in the capital projects budget for the 2024 budget. So that is part of the whole budget for your approval.
And I think it should probably go through admin for the ranking and let that admin committee do that and then bring it up to the full board.
If you
then.
make that statement, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you make that statement, so these are not ranked currently,
Well, this is his,
but they are.
ranking is, and if you can,
Well,
since you have a
we've
copy.
got the chair of admin right here. He can speak to that.
How do we
Chris.
get a copy of that?
Are they ranked?
Um,
As importance?
well, they're all numbered. And I think if you look at how they're laid out over the years, the fact that the ones that are budgeted in 2024, my guess would be that those are the priority projects because those are going first. And then as you go through the project list, 2025 has a second list.
Can we bring
Of
that up on
projects.
the screen or something?
Well, we can't, but let's go through before we dive into the details. Let's do big picture.
This is
first.
Rogers.
May I answer
of
Mr.
course, of
Sturgis's
course.
question? So, Roger and Henry put forth what they thought was a priority in the year that it's budgeted on that document. I'm sorry that not everyone has. Unfortunately, there are things that go out that are pushed out in other years that may become an urgent thing in a year that it's not budgeted for. So, if you take everything over to fiscal year 27, it's a little bit different amounts. I think it comes out to $30 million. And that's covering things because there's placeholders in there and there's things in there where they're expecting things to last a little bit longer, but it doesn't necessarily be. There's a generator in there that we're trying to work on getting for the animal control that's budgeted in year 2028. And we can't wait till 2028 to get them a generator. So this was kind of a fluid document. Unfortunately, we don't seem to be able to have time to talk about this because this is, this is allocation of assets for our buildings is incredibly important. But that's how it's prioritized.
Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
I asked Roger to email it. Here, let's see if he can.
To get it in a second.
As well, he could speak to it.
Oh,
Roger?
I'd like to have it in my hands.
Would you, do you want, all right.
Few people have it. and a few
Okay,
people
hold on,
don't.
everybody.
This is.
Ladies, gentlemen, please, it's coming. It's going to be coming. Do you want to stop now to dive into this or do you want to continue on? How many more slides do we
Well,
have?
just like everything else they've already seen before, the board's already seen before. So it's not new.
All right, so the first, I'm just trying to follow the agenda, and this is an important thing, is there's no hesitation about that at all. The very first, Ms. Juby, was put on the property tax levy amount. So I'd like to somehow follow through on what our agenda is, so we don't lose track of the important items that you put down. We'll be talking about the allocation of reserves and the fund consolidations. We can start perhaps talking about the allocation of finances for the building at that point. Yes, ma'am?
So when this agenda was put together, none of these things can be talked about independently of the other because they're all
They're intertwined.
they're all intertwined.
Hmm.
And so if I happen to have a question on the tax levy, it might also have something to do with something that comes up farther along on the agenda.
Correct.
And I would like to be able to ask it at this time. I would also like to understand, I'm only allowed 2 questions to ask.
Per topic, one question, then a follow-up, because
Okay,
otherwise.
this is pretty serious stuff and
Oh,
I
I'm not-
have more than 2 questions
Oh,
to ask.
you misunderstand me.
Well, that's why I'm asking for clarification.
You, when you ask a question, a single question, I'm just following up the Roberts rules. Ask a single question and then a follow-up question to clarify that question. You're entitled to have 30, 40, 100 questions, but I would like to have everybody given the opportunity to speak so that no one individual, no one board member dominates with a whole series of questions. It's just shared. So we're all shared.
Like a
So-
regular meeting.
So you're saying one at a time?
One at a time, one at a time, and then a follow-up for clarification, and then someone else can speak. And then we'll go back to you. So you'll, like I say, we can be here until everyone decides that they've answered asked every question that they wanted to.
Well, I think we should be here until we know how we're going forward.
And that's the board's decision. Absolutely.
So I have 4 questions. Am I only allowed to ask 1 right now?
Well, I think Kathy's got to sit down.
Because I can make 2 of them statements
Okay.
without asking a question.
Okay, just hold on a second. So are you ready for questions now, or do you want?
And we have Roger's presentation if we want to put it up on the screen at any point.
Okay, all right.
And Roger.
So we're ready for questions now? Ms. Juby.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to make my first one a comment, so it's not going to be a question. That when you talk about our FICA and our IMRF, we should levy for what we need. So regardless, whatever we need is what we should levy for. So the fact that that's up there in any type of anything where it could be shorted from something else, it shouldn't be. We need to be levying for what we're actually using in those 2 funds. So that's my statement. On the RTA sales tax reallocation, I do not believe that the board is in agreement that that should be done without a great deal of discussion. I, for one, do not want to support an allocation, which I mentioned to you before, because I think that the ramifications of it far exceed what we could gain. And the fact that we can be taking money from somewhere else, from another fund, yes, we're technically using reserve, but the money's in a big pile and it doesn't really matter where we're taking it. So I, for one, would not be in support of changing the RTA sales tax. So that's my second statement. Now, my question is, when you talk about the other fund budgets where you're not presenting those because you've said that they're balanced, it's still part of our whole budget conversation. And so I'm a little disappointed that we don't have those. I guess that's also a statement. I'm sorry.
We're printing those right now
okay,
for Wednesday.
For Wednesday though, but that's not the 24 members in this room. So I'm sorry about that. When you talk about the motor fuel tax, everyone pays it. I'm all about user fees. That's okay. I mean, if you use something, you should be expected to pay for it. But the motor fuel tax doesn't affect people the same way, even though it's a fixed dollar amount. And I really would hope that we would be able to find another way to bring in a revenue source that isn't affecting people when they have to drive to work or when they have to commute for their families. It's not the same as going to a movie and paying a tax on that, or paying a tax on another purchase. This is something that affects people disproportionately because it's regressive. It's a single amount. And so I kind of hope we can maybe have some conversations about some other type of, and I know this isn't coming as a shock to you because we've talked about this, but I the basis of the budget, I'm just having I don't support what we're suggesting. And I think we need to have a robust conversation about the things that maybe we can support, because I don't want to be voting no on all the resolutions on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Does anybody have any further comments? Let me go back to our agenda.
This is Alan.
Ms. Allen, yes, are you ready to talk about the property tax levy, or is it a general comment?
As a general comment, following up on Ms. Juby's general comment, I also don't agree that we should decimate the RTA sales tax. And I also agree that the motor fuel tax is a problem for a lot of families if we increase it so much so quickly. And I think that our reserves, or especially our rainy day reserves, were set up for this kind of problem. And that having identified the problems and really trying to get into the weeds on the problems, that then we would have some more time in the future to try and work out how we are going to be a sustainable county. Thanks. I'll let you.
All right, yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leonard here. Looking over what you presented today, Kathy, if I'm correct, we're looking at a property tax levy increase of 2.4 million, which is about a 4.9% increase in property taxes. We're looking at increasing the motor fuel tax from 4.7 cents to 8 cents. That generates another 3 million. That's a 58% increase in that tax. And then the RTA sales tax going from 75% down to 50%, generating another $6.2 million. We have a total there of $11.6 million of additional funds you're using to balance a budget. And on a budget for the general fund of 124 million, that equates to about 13.9%. I think that's excessive. And I will not be voting for it.
All of it, or?
The increases, the three increases I talked about equate to 13.9% of the general fund
Okay, all right.
increase.
So, these topics are presented to you for your conversation, for your deliberation. This is not a determination of what this is going to be. These are suggestions. Some of these proposals have certainly come from the county board, making suggestions of about the property tax, about the motor fuel tax, about the RTA tax, the reduction of that levy as well. So it has been, your voice is coming through all of this. So it's opened up for discussion. That's why none of this is written in stone at all. It's very fluid, but we had to start with some number so that you've got a baseline for discussion. Otherwise, we would go back to just a 0, 0, 0, 0, keep everything the same, and then having to deal with a descending reserve fund. So it's all up for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this and hopefully change it. My concern is at the Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday, the agenda is already set. It can't be changed. So the resolutions and the items we're voting on there can't be changed, and they incorporate all of this. So I just don't see where discussion this late in the game is going to help for us to approve a potential budget to be displayed.
Well, we were with the time crunch, as you are well aware, Mr. Leonard, that she was working as quickly and with due diligence on weekends, her staff as well, just to put together the numbers.
I'm not blaming Kathy or her staff. I know they're working hard and I appreciate every effort they make. I just think we're each and every year, the last 2-3 years, it's always been a time crunch. And we were going to start working on this budget in January of this year. We never did. Now I understand there were reasons and causes for that, but I just think, this budget doesn't have to be this complex and this difficult to understand or to approve. And I think we just need to start working on these things in a reasonable amount of time so that Kathy and her staff or whoever's working on it are not put under a timeline and a shotgun approach.
Again, we were without somebody for about 2 months, trying to find it. So we were 2 months out, and to get everybody back up to speed, a learning curve and getting everybody running. I think she's done a yeoman's job. of
Oh, I
presenting
do
the-
too. I have no complaint with what she's doing or how hard she and her staff are working. I'm just saying, we as a county board need to get our priorities set up so that this is a top priority and responsibility of we board members. And I think we need to address it earlier in the year.
Okay. Yes, of course.
I don't know that starting with the situation of having such a huge budget gap, and as you said, this is more than 10% of the budget the last few years. I don't know that starting earlier would necessarily fix the budget gap, because there's a fundamental problem with with the lack of revenue for this budget. So as I said, so it's either a decision to cut 10% of the general fund budget, or the options that I've presented are the options that are available. The county board can move the RTA sales tax. It's an option. It's available. The local motor fuel tax increase, it's an option. So these are just options. So I think the hardest part is not necessarily, I don't know that starting earlier would help.
Change the
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
Well, and I think your point is well taken, Kathy. We're not trying to shoot the messenger. We get that. But, I think what we have to look at here is the fact that, like with the potential property tax increase of 4.9%, that will generate about 2.4, 2.5 million a year, which is substantial. However, if we are truly looking long-term to try to get our budget in line where we don't have this consistent problem year in and year out, I think the very best thing we can do is let the taxpayers decide on a sales tax referendum. 1/4 of 1%, which would mean you would be taxed 25 cents more on every $100 you spend, would generate approximately 15 million a year. And with this property tax increase, if in fact it's approved, I think we take a 50-50 possibility of getting the sales tax referendum passed down to maybe 10 or 20%. So that's my concern. It's not a short term, it's a long-term
And
concern.
Everyone is anxious to talk about the potential sales tax referendum, but that is not germane to this year's budget because the money would not be adjusted until 25. So we can talk about it and we can plan for that. And we've already, state's attorney's already sent me information. I've had some preliminary conversations about it for planning on how to do this, but it is not germane to this year's budget. Next year's budget, if the public passes it, then we're fine.
The only reason it's germane to this year's budget is because if we pass a property tax increase, the public is going to recognize that. And next year, if we go to a referendum for a sales tax increase, I think the public will not be in favor of it.
All right, you've had lots of conversation. Let Ms. Gums and then Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gums here. Mr. Leonard, I agree with you at some level, but on a basic, and I'm grateful for this, it's a discussion, right? That's what we should be doing today. So I'm very excited about that. But when we're discussing this, I say, yeah, maybe if we raise it this year, they won't have an appetite to vote yes. They don't have to vote yes. We take that chance. We still have a job to do. I believe that it's part of our job and we take that chance, and the taxpayer obviously has the ability to say, you've done too much. We're not going to vote yes. And I agree with that, but I don't think that relieves us from our obligations. And I think that the 2.5 is part of that conversation we're supposed to be having today. And I agree. I hear you. I just think that if we keep putting that off and keep putting that off, as you know, we may never get anything done from our seats, because the last budget, we had this very same conversation. The previous year, we had the very same conversation. We had the same fears and we did not solve any problems. And, you know, so I know everybody in here has a million things to say and ideas and, you know, nothing is set in stone. And I'm always the one to say, convince me why I'm wrong or let me tell you what I think. So hopefully we can get those things happening. Everybody has something to say. So I just wanted, I mean, that's my, am I wrong? You know, I don't know. I might be, you know,
You're honest.
well, I try to be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dallas.
Where to start? Kathy, I do think starting sooner could help. The thing we needed to start sooner on though, the sooner is like 30 years ago. We've failed to ever communicate adequately to the taxpayers of Kane County what our portion of the bill really is. We send a bill out, it says Kane County on it. We're responsible for sending it, for collecting it. We are the face of it. And we have never succeeded in really, truly getting any understanding from the general public about what portion of it, what a small portion of it is us, and what a tremendous value we are. And until we get that message across to more of them, we will continue to have this battle every year forever. Now, that being said, we all know it. It's an election year. So everybody tread lightly, right? Careful what you say and what you ask for and everything. I've been on record as saying that there's a cost of doing business, that we are a good value. The county actually does need some more revenue to provide the product to the services that we do at the level that everyone has come to expect. Is this the time to do it? Is there ever a good time to do it? Probably not. I would say we've made some progress in not turning our back on new growth. Never, ever skip taking the new growth, folks. Any year, no matter what. It's a slap in the face to the people that were already here. It's wrong. It's a terrible idea. Never ignore new growth. So in this year's budget, please take the new growth. Beyond that, stay off their bill. It's not the time. I would love to ask them for a little bit more, but not now. I also don't think, as Ms. Juby pointed out, that driving is a real discretionary kind of activity. So I don't want to, burden them at the pump either. I do like, and I do think it's germane to this year's budget, although it's delayed gratification, and we're not big on that here in America. We like everything right now. But the sales tax through a referendum gives us an opportunity to have the public weigh in on it, spread it out in a way that is far less painful for each individual. In fact, share some of that pain with people from outside of the county. And it represents many times the amount of dollars that you get from either of the other two. So I think that is absolutely not just something we should talk about, but something we should take action on to put in motion. And speaking of motion, which reminds me of transportation, how many times can I vote no on the RTA sales tax? I wish it was many, because I would say to you no 100 times. When you move that money from transportation, and Kathy, you know this better than most of us here, every million is 5 million on the back end. And that's before you talk job creation and economic impact of large scale projects. Then the number balloons even further. So no. Not even to go from 75% to 70%. I would still say no. In your fiduciary duty part of this role, in being fiscally responsible, that's just a really bad move. That's the most expensive money you could move in this whole board game. Sorry, it's not a game. I don't want to take it the wrong way. Don't move that. That's the most expensive money for you to move. That's like paying off the card that you got for the furniture with 0% interest. Well, you let the one that has 23% interest go ahead and ride. No. That's all I can remember that I wanted to cover for right now, because, you know, as I go through some of these things, my head gets filled with lots of ideas about it.
This is all very challenging conversations. Yes, Mr. Linder.
Kind of to Mr. Davis' point, but maybe to a different conclusion. I had the opportunity this afternoon to answer a social media post from someone who was trying to get taxpayers to come storm the gates here. And so I did some math. You know, I said, if your tax bill is $6,000, which is about what mine is, 4% of that goes to the county. And 5% of that 4% comes down to $12 a year. Now, it's a $12 a year increase. We pass that up. We still have the problems of not paying our employees enough, not taking care of our buildings the way we should. We still have those problems. And at the same time, the school districts will increase their taxes. The library districts will increase their taxes. The community colleges will increase their taxes. The municipalities will increase their taxes. And the taxpayers will be more angry with us next year than they are this year, because their bill went up by $200 to $250, of which zero of that is ours because we don't take the 5% that would have been $12.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ms.
Chair.
Bates.
I believe that Kane County has become a turnip, and we're not going to get any more blood out of this turnip. We have squeezed and squeezed and squeezed our departments to the point where they can't cut anymore. We're losing good people. We're losing precious, valuable people whom we have trained, and they leave after a year or two. I just lost Ivy Klee, my great resource manager. I don't know what she went and got paid from by the EPA, but I bet it was a lot more than we're paying. We're living in the past and the future. We're not living in the present, where we have to take an action right now. I think the CPI tax, that should be no more of a big deal than every year that CPI tax should just be a normal. I'm on Social Security. Every year I get a raise. I don't do anything for it. I just sit there and they tell me I'm getting a 3% raise. How can the county be expected to survive without some kind of an increase in our budget? So I think the difference between us and the Kane County Forest Preserve, where people come in and say, please raise our taxes, is that it is a perception of value. I think Mr. Davis said that. People can see the forests. Well, let's make sure they see what we're doing. We have to make sure they appreciate everything that the county board is doing. And these charts, I asked Madam Chair to put these up a year ago, and I think the idea was to show that the Kane County Board is a sliver. We're not taking, that check may say Kane County Board on it, but we are just a sliver. We have to take action right away. That's it. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, yes.
This is a question for the state's attorneys. What, being new to this process, when do we have to pass our budget and appropriations ordinance? What's our deadline?
It's by November 30th. And we have the series of meetings that we have is we have the finance and budget committee meeting this Wednesday, which I do believe we can change a number in the resolution. I mean, we should be able to do that. If anyone wanted to change a number, you can change a number in the resolution. And then it goes to executive committee on November 1st. And then there would be a special county board meeting on Monday, November 6th to begin the 15 days. The budget has to be on display for 15 days. So it would be placed on display on Monday, November 6th. And then we have it scheduled that it would be approved on Tuesday, November 21st, the week of Thanksgiving.
So we have 9 days to play with if we really wanted to.
So you can, those those last two meetings of decision, and then, final decision. We have some wiggle room with that. We thought we'd, like to get it done before Thanksgiving, but we can move it past Thanksgiving. Because there are days within that. So if this board collectively decides, because those are special board meetings, they're not going to be put in with the regular November board meeting, because I thought you'd want to have it unique. So we do have some wiggle room. So if after this determination of this meeting or on the finance committee, if there's still concerns and you're not ready to move forward, we can push those days back.
Okay. And then
Chair.
I think there was a question that Aaron had.
Yeah.
Mr.
Oh,
Shepherd
Mr.
had-
Shepherd had the answer.
Well, I was gonna say, you can change the numbers, but you can only change the numbers if you have satisfied the legal predicate to do that. So for example, you've got a deadline by which you have to have the tariff and taxation hearing, if in fact one would be triggered by what change might be suggested. And so you've got that running up against the deadline to pass the budget. And again, the deadline to pass the levy.
And that truth and comes, that's 20 days, correct?
Yes.
20, what, for the truth and taxation, or what is it, 15 days? It's 15
No, it's
days.
20 days.
20 days.
15 is for the budget to be put on display.
On display, okay.
So I mean, if you got to November 28th and you decided you wanted to increase the amount, that would put you, you wouldn't have time to do the hearing.
Correct.
Just so-
Microphone.
Yes.
Could we review those dates, please? Could somebody put those in a bumper sticker for me? Not you.
So the current schedule is
Thanks.
Wednesday, October 25th at Finance Committee. We present the budget. Then it goes to Executive Committee on Wednesday, November 1st. Then it goes to Monday, November 6th. And it will be put on public display. And it has to be on public display for at least 15 days, so that we currently have Tuesday, November 21st as the 15th day from the
Tuesday,
6th.
November 21st.
Tuesday, November 21st. The Tuesday of Thanksgiving week.
And can it be
Okay.
changed between, after the time that goes on display? Or does that reset the?
I think so, yeah.
Committee Chairman?
Once,
That's-
wait a minute, let's ask the state's attorney, once you display the budget, can the board change it? Yes. We still have flexibility with that.
Certainly.
Do you restart the clock or not for the 15 days?
All right, there was a comment online.
Yes, this is Berman.
Oh, Dale, hi.
I apologize for not being there. But Kathleen has only presented to us what we feel might be the answers to our budget questions. And she presented three. One, that we could raise our taxes for PTEL. One is we can move money from RTA. And what she's saying that we want to move money from RTA, but we're going to subsidize that by increasing motor fuel tax. Or the other thing is, we can just take money out of reserve and kick the can down the road like we have for so many years. So that's our decision. Now, we can also talk about sales tax increase, but we're talking about, we're elected to make decisions for the county as to how to balance the budget, not to throw it to the county and say, hey, now you got to vote on something else again. Here we are, we've presented with the facts that we can balance our budget. All we have to do is choose how we're going to do that. And it's not, the only way we're saying, okay, let's make it in the future. We'll say, we'll just take it out of reserves and forget about all the other things. And if that's what we want to vote on, fine. That's what we have 24 members there to make their decisions to do those things. And that's why it's been presented this way by Kathleen. We have to make the decisions. That's it.
You're here.
Hold on, Ms. Bates. I want to make sure that there's no one else because everyone has not spoken yet. Anybody over here? 2 cents in. All right.
Okay, speaking of these dates, if we could complete this before Thanksgiving, I think that would be respectful of all of our families.
It's almost exactly the same as was previous years. So we're following the path that we have done, mirroring the path we've done previously.
What will happen, but if the deadline is November 30th, do we vote on the 21st?
Yes,
And that should be the final vote.
correct.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Juby.
So Kathy, could you refresh my memory of how much we would get if we took the full levy amount?
About 3.5 million.
And then you were suggesting
4.9.
Well, the percent is 4.9%, but the amount is about 2.5 million.
Okay, 4.9 will get us 2.5 million. And did we figure out what a 1% levy would get us?
A 1%. Somebody do math.
500,000.
500,000. Yeah, if you just take new construction alone, it's a little over $500,000.
No, not new construction. New construction is, I agree with Mr. Davis, that's a given. We should always be taking that because it's an unfair advantage that people get on the rest of the taxpayers. What would a 1% tax levy increase add to us in addition, keeping the new construction out?
Be about 500,000.
Another,
Yeah.
about another 500,000.
Okay.
What, about 500,000? Yeah.
Madam Chair, what was the answer to the question about the PTEL? That's 3.5 million.
No, it's 2.5.
Okay, thank you.
$2,447,509 is what I've
Madam
written
Chair
down.
Guns.
No, I'm sorry.
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 She just said the 5% full levy is $3.5 million. Is that not correct?
That's not correct.
I had
2.5.
3.5, but we're.
So,
I just
so
wrote down
the,
what she said. I'm just trying to
so,
clarify.
so 1%, so last year's total levy for King County was 57 million, 472. So 1% of that is 574,000.
Okay.
There we go.
What was the 5% full levy amount if it was not 3.5 million?
It was 3.5 million.
So why is
Well,
Bill
that's gonna
shaking
go
his head?
into-
It's 2.8.
2.8 something, I think.
2.85 million, but 3.5 million is a huge difference. So which is it?
4.9%.
The full levy of 5%,
So the,
what we're allowed to maximum take under PTEL, which
if-
is 5%.
if you take the way that the formula is done, when you apply 5%, you first apply 5% to the prior year's levy, which is up there, 57,472, and you take 5% of that. And then you apply it to existing properties, but then the way the formula works, then you add in new construction. And when you add in new construction, it actually ends up going over the PTEL limit. It goes up to 6%, which is where the 3.5 million comes
Right.
from.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand about truth and taxation. I am just trying to figure out if we take a full 5% levy, not on new construction, what difference will that be?
That's this 2.5 million here.
Okay.
And then where did the 3.5 number come from?
That's if you apply it to new construction as well.
Okay, but new construction was only $500,000. That should be 3 million, not 3.5.
But
million.
the way the formula works with the extension,
A formula.
it's
Okay,
it's a formula.
okay.
Just really quick for clarification, Gums, that 2.4 million was off the 4.9%. That's what I wrote down. To keep us under the 5,
So that 4.9% that's up there,
right?
so that 2.5 million is 4.9% higher than last year's levy, total levy. So it's just to keep it under, so this would be a levy that would not require the county to go to a truth and taxation hearing.
And includes new construction.
And if we went to the truth and taxation hearing, that's 20 days.
Yes, per the state's attorney, yes.
Kathy, I have just a clarity question. The Veterans Commission is included in that tax levy.
Yes,
So $460,000 is included in the amount for the levy.
it's because the Veterans Commission can raise their property tax levy.
Up to over $1 million, if they so choose,
Yes,
without any input from the board.
right. They raised, if you look at the change from 2022 to 2023, they raised their levy.
Correct.
Mhm.
That is correct.
They're sort of a separate entity, but they're built into our levy.
So that's in addition to. Okay, minus, we can't spend that. That's for the Veterans Commission. State of Illinois passed that. Yes.
He has a
yes,
point.
sir.
I just want to make sure that we all understand that there are two different triggers here. That the truth in taxation hearing is triggered by anything over the 5%. But the levy restriction under PTEL is different because certain items such as the new growth or the veterans assistance are not calculated toward what would require a referendum to go over. So and it sounds like you were already going to have a truth and taxation hearing for Mill Creek. And the truth and taxation is a hearing with an opportunity for public comment. And that's the only thing that it involves. As opposed to saying if we're going to go over a certain amount, we can't because we'd have to have a referendum.
And just to follow up, when they are adjusting the levy, if it goes over a certain percentage, it is reduced, is it not? Because you can't go further than the PTEL. Which,
Correct. If you levy, I mean, you could levy 114, you could, and there will simply then be a reduction that will be applied when all the final numbers are there. And the board has the option, any taxing body has the option to say, if we have levied too much, here's where we want it reduced. And if you don't, then the county clerk will reduce it across the board pro rata.
okay,
So yes, if you look at the sheets that the county clerk issues every year, you will see in many instances, in order to make for a taxing body that wants to make sure that they have levied every possible dime, they will usually over levy knowing that there will be a reduction, but they won't leave anything untapped if they do that. So, those are, there's always or almost always a somewhat discrepancy between the amount of the levy and the amount extended by the clerk in the actual tax bill.
okay, thank you for that
If that makes
clarification.
any sense.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Mr. Phillips.
I have a follow-up question for Kathy. Am I understanding you right, that if we just levied for the new construction, we would still have to have a truth in taxation?
No,
Okay,
no.
I misunderstood you.
It's included in that amount.
Madam Chair Gums.
Yes, Ms. Combs.
Thank you. I think, to the gentleman's question, Mill Creek, Mr. Williams, Mill Creek, I think is going to have that truth in taxation. I think that's what Ms. Hopkinson was referring to. Am I correct there? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. For you, Ms. Hopkinson, I spent some time talking to you. I've spent time talking to all of our other board members. Can you break it down for us? If we do nothing, if we do not increase our revenues at all,
It's there.
and we continue on this path
Mhm.
that we're on. Obviously, I've spoken here before about how we're a training ground for all of these wonderful individuals, basically learning, getting great experience here and then going somewhere else for more money. With that the back pocket there, when we do nothing, where will we be next year?
Well,
Like, I mean, you and I had this frank conversation. I guess that's what I'm kind of looking for. So our other finance director also indicated, we don't have an appetite to do some hard things, right? This is why we're here, to have these hard conversations. They suck. I can't stand them, but here I am having them. So I want a frank conversation about if we continue along this path year after year after year, how do we take care of our people and our properties?
right. So, I mean, if we continue every year to give employees raises and continue along with the equity adjustment project that has been going on for a year and a half, and increasing costs, in probably about 3 years, we're going to have to choose between staff and roofs. Repairing roofs. We'll be choosing between capital projects and staff, because we'll have run out of reserves.
And I guess, thank you for that answer, but I'm kind of I'm a little disappointed that we're not having a more vigorous discussion back and forth here, because I was kind of hoping that people wouldn't be afraid to say how they feel. And I know that's the case all the time. We have to be very careful about what we say. So it's not taken out of context, or it's, set in stone. Gums believes this. This meeting is designed so that we can have these conversations with one another and work out a problem. We need to have a solution to this problem. And I'm asking you guys to participate a little bit further, because I don't know how to fix it either, but I do know that if we do nothing, we are in a bad position. And the people that work for us count on us to take care of them. We have two things. And another one of my board members said the same thing over and over. We have two things: people and properties. We're not taking care of our people, and we're not taking care of our properties. So are we going to sit back and talk about it next year? I guess that's my question.
Yes, sir.
Michelle, to your request, I guess that I have sat in this chair now for a few months and have asked whether we call them mandated responsibilities that we have and scope creep that has occurred beyond what the mandates were. If we can get some report on that.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming, and I appreciate that. Without that, I want to give you that feedback that if we have reached the point economically where we need to live, and these are generalizations, I don't mean them to be that way, but if we need to live within our means, if we are providing services that are beyond the scope of what our commission says we should be doing, then that's the conversation I'd like to begin with, not immediately going to the taxpayer and saying, hey, I realize it's only $17 or
12.
I'm sorry, 12. Let's call it 11 and we'll round down. I mean, we don't want to, and I didn't mean that to come across facetiously, Mike, please.
We're just having a conversation.
It's that, but it's not that. It's that plus a sales tax, plus a gas tax, plus a plus a plus. And if somebody was to come to Cliff and say, can you tell me where you're supposed to be and how much over or above you are in terms of services, what do you have to say? And I can't answer that. I just can't answer that. So I'm hoping that that's coming to be able to allow that robust conversation, whether it's KDOT, the health department, the sheriffs, something like that. I would love to have that conversation, but I don't know what the baseline is.
If I can just give an update of
Thank you.
what the information that I've been able to obtain. I have got the mandated services that have been required by the state of Illinois from 2017 to current. Those will be put into an Excel spreadsheet. They will then be passed out to each one of the department heads. I will ask them what their budget is. This is state mandated. which is required. It's going to take a little bit of time, Mr. Surges. I'm not going to be able to get that to you next week because of the depth of the research, but I've got the material. I've got a staff member now who's been assigned, thanks to Mr. Fonstock, who's going to help me put this together. And it's going to take a little bit of time to actually be thoughtful with it. We can talk about the Safety Act. The unintended consequences of the Safety Act is not just our attorneys and our people from the courts, the clerks, et cetera, but it's also the additional lights, it's the additional maintenance, it's the cleaning, it's the supplies. I'm going to say as simple as additional paper for the bathrooms. All of these are unintentional consequences to this act that are a hard line budget for us. I did talk to Tom Rickard, who's sitting there with us. And if we were to cut back to exactly what would be the mandated services for roads and transportation, it's just keeping the roads in good repair. No new construction, no additional stop signs, no stoplights, no new sidewalks, bike paths, any of that. Their mandate is simply to keep the roads in good repair. And we're a growing county. So that would mean no new roads, no new turnabouts. We just had a woman who literally broke our hearts the other day talking about how her children at the high school happened to witness a death of a motorcyclist and urging for a stop sign for that. So none of that would be discussed because of the mandates. Yes, ma'am.
Can I,
Could I finish, please?
oh, I'm so
I'm,
sorry.
I'm just, and the second portion, Michelle, was to say, it's, and I'm stumbling with my words here, but,
Stumble, we're just having to talk.
mm, this data is probably, I'm stumbling because I think the data has already become available and I haven't reviewed it, but to say we might want this increase or that increase and a sales tax. Well, how do we compare to the other counties around us? And Mr. Davis, we've had this conversation before where the greatest thing in the world would be for people from outside our area coming and spending their money here. But would they be attractive to come do that? Are we still a bargain for that? And so, you know, in terms, and I see you pointing and like I said, I'm stumbling on this to say comparatively, are we lower, higher, right there?
Lowest.
So whether it's gas tax, whether it's sales tax, whether it's,
It's right there.
and that was my stumble. I'm being very
Yeah.
candid. I know it was available. I just haven't taken the time to actually review it and say, wow, we're in a really good place, or well, no, we're not.
They're the lowest, if you can take a look per population and for the other, 3 other counties. So comparison to 4, Will is not included in this. We are the lowest. And is there a reason why you've removed Will? You just didn't have the information?
I didn't have Will to
Yeah.
begin with. I can add Will. But yeah, I took these numbers right off their annual audited financial statements. And I just picked all the taxes that are similar, because all the counties have these same taxes. They all have property taxes. They all have the sales tax, the RTA sales tax, the state MFT, the local MFT, what they call other income taxes and PPRT. And then just took the population number that was included in their annual audit and divided it. And just based on these general tax revenues for 2021 and 2022. Those are the results.
I guess I wasn't looking for the results. I guess I was saying, if we're going to recommend a whatever percent, is that percent higher than or less than our comparing? If we're comparing against 3 sister counties, are we above or below that?
Are you asking about a specific tax?
Well, I guess what I'm asking is pick one. It doesn't matter which one.
Well, they're all different. So
I know you listed results, not
so McHenry, so
numbers.
for example, McHenry's tax rate is more than twice our tax rate. Our tax rate last year was 0.33 or 0.31. Theirs is 0.69. DuPage has a lower tax rate, but they have way more sales tax revenue because they're more of a consumer heavy, retail heavy county. They have Oak Brook, they have Naperville. Lake, they obviously their property values are very high. So their property tax revenue is very high. But interestingly enough, Lake just put in the local motor fuel tax in 2021. They didn't have it before, and they just started assessing the local motor fuel tax in the middle of 2021.
So you're looking at the footer is kind of the comparative there.
The amount that says major revenues per capita. I just took those major revenue sources and divided it by the population.
And
Just because I think everyone's always trying to compare us to another county, and each and every county is so different in terms of just the makeup of the county, their tax base, everything is so different. But this is for what it's worth.
And McHenry County, just a few weeks ago, if you remember, raised their motor fuel tax, so they would not raise the property tax, the CPI. They kept that flat. But in order to balance their budget, they increased the motor fuel tax. So that was their suggestion on how to do this. But all motor fuel tax does not go into the general fund. It goes specifically into roads and transportation. It is restricted for that. Mr. Caius.
I'm not sure. Silva may have had her hand up first.
Oh,
She's
oh,
been
um,
struggling for a while.
I didn't see. Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I had interrupted
oh,
Ms.
then, okay.
Mosser. I am
Let's-
so sorry.
Let's our state's
That was the
attorney
most
make a
polite
comment.
slap in the face.
You're welcome, anytime.
Mine?
No, she had her hand up.
I did actually. We are just looking at a couple of things for legality purposes that we do want to bring to the board. There was mention that there was money that was going to be taken from Fund 127 to balance the budget. We're looking at that now because at this point, we don't have a legal opinion yet as to whether or not that is actually allowed, but we'll get that to you. That's that fund that was created to finance things for judiciary for technology purposes, for example. But we will get back to you. The other part is I think we need to be very careful when we're talking about PTEL and truth in taxation. Now, I will admittedly tell all of you that I am clearly not the expert on it. But for example, to say that Mill Creek is has a PTEL limit, but PTEL doesn't actually apply to SSAs is something that's been brought up to me. So we need to be very careful when we're interchanging all of that because it is not the same and it's not applicable everywhere. For that purpose, I would send that over to somebody who knows a lot more about that. And I don't know if Ms. Brady wants to opine more on that now.
Detail does not apply to SSAs.
That's good to know.
Well, and can I just, for 2021, the Mill Creek levy required a truth in taxation and the county did publish the notice. Oh, yes.
Can you use your microphone, Aaron, please? There's one right there. We'll get you one.
Truth in taxation and PTEL are two
Right.
different laws and have two
Right.
different sets of requirements. So yes, they are required to do that. There is a special service area law on truth and taxation that's particular to that, but just and the nomenclature is confusing. I get it, but just a matter of
Okay.
keeping it
Okay.
straight when we're.
Special service area is a separate unit of government legally. So whatever, it's not like you have to take that levy and add it to the county levy.
They are not included within the county's base.
Correct.
base when we're talking about extension limitations.
Right. Correct.
That's correct. All right, you ready?
Thank you. I'm ready. Thank you. To Ms. Gums, Commissioner Gums' point, just sometimes listening to the conversation is kind of the most helpful thing. Because as we've spoken before, you feel very strongly on one end and I tend to feel more strongly on the other end. The concern that I have is exactly what Mr. Commissioner Surges brought up about maybe we have to have the conversation of limiting services. And that's what scares me because I do feel we are offering great services and to reduce them would really affect a great number of the population that I represent, that you represent. I've never voted, at least to my memory, for a property tax increase. I do see the need to continue to provide those services and to continue to reward staff for a good job done. But what I'm hearing is that we might have a couple of years yet before we have to make this decision. And the reason I say that is because timing is of the essence. I think, yes, things are getting better, but I also think, and I keep hearing from my constituency, that our constituency, that they need time to recuperate. So I would just caution us about appearing too eager to raise too much too fast, as Mr. Leonard pointed out originally.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Do you have any? So I'm just doing an informal poll. Neutral at this point?
No, I'm not neutral at this point.
Okay, so no.
So you're negative.
At this point, I would be a no.
To all suggestions.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Point of information, just following this agenda, are we still only speaking on number one, the potential property tax levy? We
That's-
haven't even gone into
That's
2,
ex-
3, and 4, correct?
That we're
Okay.
still on number one and
Just
I was
making sure
giving a
because
little
of
bit
time.
I know, well, it's, you may want, if you have dinner dates, you may want to send a quick notice to everybody that you're going to be a little bit late.
I have to leave at 6
Mhm.
o'clock.
Absolutely. 4:30.
At 5:30, well, let's, before Mr. Leonard, before I recognize you, just so I get a feeling of the board, are we ready to move forward out of the levy discussion? Or does anybody else have any other questions? I see one more. All right, so let's get this and we'll answer these 3 questions. And then let's go on to the next level because we do have that little treat that's waiting for you. Yes, sir.
David
Yep.
Young.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr.
She's
Young?
looking at both of us. Okay, David Young, this is my first time going through this, so I'm sure I'm just looking at the very tip of the iceberg. The couple of things that come, 3 things that come to mind when we're talking about, for me, is that I'm looking at the presentation that Kathy gave on October 10th, and we're going to a 90-day reserve requirement now, and therefore we have a reserve of $53 million. And then we have another 14 million from the treasurer who had made that additional money on, from that investment. And then I want to bring up the $2 million that the clerk's office received from a private grant that we could ask for that money back. So now we could, but so now this is what I wanted just to bring to the table is that you're looking at, 53 plus 16, $70 million. And I know that we have some stuff scheduled for capital projects, but I mean, our total budget is $123 million. How long is it going to take us to blow through $70 million? So I'm looking at this as, why do we need to do anything? Thank you.
So Kathy, I hope you can help me out with this. If I misspeak, please, just for clarity. $2 million is restricted money for the clerk. It does not belong to, so we can't use that as restricted money for the general fund. So that's a minus on that. As far as the interest goes, the interest is dispersed along all the accounts. Now we can potentially, if the board so chooses, you can sweep it away. And that was just talked a little bit about Fund 127. That was the referencing, is sweeping some of the interest because I believe they have $55,000 in that account. So it potentially for that one could be swept. But what are we doing here? We've got the transportation, which is something we all think is very vital and important for the county. They have, I think, $3.5 million in earned interest. If we sweep that, we're reducing the budget as well, going back into the general fund to pay for this, that, and the other things. So yes, it can be done. But not any money that's, I'm using, restricted is not the accounting term. It is, what is the accounting term that you corrected me on? It's reserved, can't touch it. It's already allocated to another expense.
And just, we had this slide at a previous presentation, but the cash and investments is pooled for almost all the county funds. ARPA is separate. But when you do the allocation, transportation, since they have 17 funds, they have most of the cash in the county. They do. They would get they would get at least a third of the interest earned. The general fund's cash balance isn't as big of a cash balance because we keep digging into our reserves, whereas the capital funded funds like transportation, they have over $100 million in cash. So when you just do the allocation of interest based on percent to total, transportation gets most of it. And also on the 90-day, the county's financial policies for over probably 30 years have always been 90 days. And it's the best practice. It was the 2024 budget policy that was adopted by the board this spring that says for purposes of the budget, the reserves should be 180. So one of the resolutions that I have for Wednesday is just to amend the budget policy so that it is in line with the county's long financial policies of 90 days.
Please include on the, when you reference the transportation dollars sitting there, the term that Madam Chair just was reminding herself of. These are not unallocated. They are reserved, they're promised, they're leveraged, they're spent already in many cases. So
Yes.
it's not like there's just a pile of cash sitting there earning interest that we're not putting to work.
Some is, so if you look, some is encumbered, some is unencumbered. So encumbered means, so when transportation typically brings a resolution before the county board, it's to spend dollars over the course of several years. So we need to hire an engineering firm and we're going to be paying this engineering firm over 2-3 years. So those funds are encumbered, but not 100% of the funds are encumbered.
No,
Right.
but they allow us the leverage to continue to move on large scale projects and capital projects and things that, while they may not show up, Cliff, in a mandated services effort, which we have looked at before over the years.
2017.
What you also find from something like that is that we may have mission drifted beyond mandatory services. Scope creep, whatever, but what we did was create services that are now expected and part of the lifestyle of Kane County that makes people want to be here and pay our taxes and live here. So it's a little trickier than just cut and dried mandated services. And I would still insist that of all the different funds available, a terminology that we find more often in private sector than here is that we have a return on investment in those transportation dollars that you do not have in any of the others. So.
Well,
Madam Chair.
as said by the Chair of Transportation. Yes, okay. All right, hold on, Mr. Tepe. Mr. Tepe had his hand up and then we'll recognize everybody else. Mr. Tepe?
Chair, thank you, Madam Chair, Tepe here. I'd like to expand a little bit on what I think Ms. Gumbs was getting around to, but one of the things that to me, having been on this board for 3 years now, I cannot think back to a time when a department manager or head or whatever came forth and said they needed people or they needed money for their people or they needed to bring their salary up so that we could save it. I cannot remember a time when we turned down that request. And every time I hear that request, I think, why are we waiting until it becomes an issue before we do something? So in my mind, I think one of the things that we really need to take care of is employee compensation. Okay, so I'm really glad that that is happening here now. Okay, now, I understand from some of my other friends that, being an employee of the government, you've got certain things that are available to you that aren't necessarily available to the rest of the public. But when we can't pay our people a competitive wage in comparison to our collar counties around us, I think we're making a mistake. Okay, so I'm really glad that we're putting equity in this budget now. Okay. Second is I've been sitting here for a while, letting it sink in because I had expected some different alternatives in there. Taxation is always a hard issue. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a $5 increase. For some reason, it just gets everybody upset. All right. We can get a 15% increase in Social Security, but a $5 increase in taxes, becomes a major arguing point. All right. So we've got to begin to look at that. So to me, increasing the tax rate on property tax by a reasonable amount makes sense, right? It bothered me initially changing the RTA tax allocation. And I had to come to the situation that we can only do that if we increase the gas tax rate up to the same rate as the counties around us are charging. So I don't look at it as though, gee, we're creating this whole new tax for people. I look at it that we're actually lagging behind our sister counties. Let's get up to it. Now, even though the gas tax doesn't completely make the transportation department whole, it comes close enough in my mind. Okay. So I'm pleasantly surprised at doing this. And I think it just makes sense, even though it's a hard decision for us to make. And I also think it's all very intertwined. We can't just take one piece out. I think in particular, Kathy's done a phenomenal job of putting this together as a package. And rather than taking pins out of the package, I think we need to look at accepting the logic and the way she's looking forward, not just to next budget year, but to the next 3 years. So thank you.
Okay, well, this will be short. Watch out when anybody says that. Just to back up, Mr. Davis was saying, I think that although it's important that we pay attention to the mandates, like the mandated study, the study of the mandates we have, to your point, I think that it's sort of a red herring to say, well, we just have to do the mandates and that's all we have to do, because they don't tell us how good the roads have to be. They say we have to be safe. Well, I know transportation has cut back on painting and things like that. So does that make it less safe? We in this county have to have a certain standard that our constituents expect, as Mr. Davis spoke. And I think that we need to stay in focus on what we need to provide, using the mandates as a guide, or at least at the very lowest level. But I think that above, we're in a position where we're more of a county with more people and more things going on, that we need to get above the mandates. We need to strike a point well above the mandates to have the kind of living that people want to move into and take part of here in King County.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say two things. Number one, I apologize, but I have to leave. But secondly, the one other option that I would like everyone to consider is, I know in interest through September, we've realized about a $13.8 million gain or plus, and we've got 2 months left. So I think conservatively, we're going to have about 15 million there. I understand, pardon me?
You mean interest?
Interest, yes, I'm sorry. So interest earned on our monies. And I know there are allocations to the different departments, but I know that we don't necessarily have to give all of it to each and every department. And I'm wondering if we couldn't maybe at least take 6 million of the 15 million from the interest earned instead of taxing our citizens at a 13.9% rate on our budget. So that's my suggestion. You know, we all don't agree on everything, but I respect everybody's opinion, and I'm not mad at anybody for how they vote. We just have our own opinion. So thank you very much.
Madam Chair Ford.
I think I'm on deck.
Okay.
Go. Okay, Bates here. I want to speak to the transportation multiplier, which if we, I feel like the pieces to the puzzle are coming together. And it's a good feeling for me. I appreciate the multiplier for the transportation money, that we can't let these matching funds go. But if we, on the other hand, raise the motor fuel tax, only we are so much lower than the other counties that we are in fact just matching some of the other counties. I appreciate what Ms. Luby, Leslie said about Miss Leslie said about that we don't want to have a regressive tax in our motor fuel tax, but to match the other counties, we could bring our motor fuel tax up quite a bit. And I think that this idea of scope creep, I believe that really we're talking about the excellence of King County, that going above and beyond what has been mandated by the state of Illinois is what makes us an excellent county where we all want to live. As far as the security of our employees, yes, government employees do get some benefits, but my dad was a civil service guy, civil service worker, and he said that he was a second generation Italian immigrant. So he said that a lot of immigrants take government jobs because of the security of the position. That might be one of the benefits. However, as we sit here talking about letting our reserves dwindle to nothing and possibly lay off someday, we're not giving our employees that benefit of of the security of a government job. So I say we can't let our reserves dwindle to nothing. And I feel the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. Move a little bit of the RTA money out of transportation, raise the motor fuel tax a little bit to make up for that, and then raise the levy just to the CPI level, which is just giving ourselves the breathing room we need. So I think the pieces of the puzzle are coming together.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The motor fuel tax, and I know before we had talked about it, it seems like in a couple of spots, something came up where before that it was being double taxed through another part of it. That's one. Two is some of these increases that we talked about is only bringing us a small amount. I do understand with the transportation and what it brings to the table with the, as she said, multiplier. But it's hard to believe that there's not some way we can use some of that interest, because it's interest, it's extra that has came in. It's not something that's a part of the general budget as a whole. It's something, to me, above that. So I can't see why we can't pull from that first and then try to figure out a way to balance. I do believe we need to give the people of King County the opportunity to hear this and make their own decisions about tax increase. Being you talked about that, that's one I could see doing, and the sales tax. But we do need to make sure that we sell ourselves well on this, the one thing that has worked out for the Forest Preserve is not just because it's a Forest Preserve that people can see, is how well that when we have done the increases, how well it's been sold to the public and explained to them what we're trying to accomplish, what it's being used for. So that's, to me, those are vital points in this.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gumbs, if I just may to reflect. The Forest Preserve has got an amazing opportunity because it's a single service. We have multiple services. You have one, as a product, Forest Preserve has one product, land protection, open space, trees, and enjoyment, clean air, et cetera. It's one product. We have courts, we have roads, we have development, we have zoning, et cetera, health department. We have a multiplicity of services, and together they become very complicated because it depends on what your needs are and what you're going to latch on to as far as a constituent. Forest Preserve, single service. So you put up a beautiful pine tree, walking path, the Fox River. Oh my gosh, who doesn't love that? But you
I
start.
think I object. I'm sorry. I got to throw that in.
I think that might be, I think that might be unfair a little bit in oversimplifying the role of the Forest Preserve District.
I think we should stick, yeah, point of order. I thought we should stick to what we were talking about, which is the county. Let's not try to unsell anybody else.
I was waiting for that.
And can we, for another
just-
point of order, can we get, are we doing this point by point? I'm completely lost in
okay.
this 1, 2, 3.
So we're still on the levy, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 comments from the board members so far. So we're almost getting there.
We pass?
Melina?
Ms. Gums had her hand up first.
I've been speaking, so I'll
Okay.
yield to you.
Director Hopkinson, I know you have this slide up here about the interest. Can I just have your statement on your recommendation for earned income, for the interest earned in 2023? Because I've had several board members mention it. Why can't we use it to balance our budget for 24? Are we using it? If you can just provide your comment, because
It will be recorded in the books. It's part for 2023 interest. It's allocated across all the funds. That second column there, fiscal 23 estimated gross amount. All of those amounts will be recorded in all of those funds across the county. It will help every one of those funds. And my recommendation as a finance person who has to put together a budget is that interest is the type of revenue that's good for capital, to build up your capital funds, to build up your reserve funds, because when it's good, it's very good. It's not as easy to predict and to forecast interest over the long term, like other types of revenue, like our sales tax revenue and our property tax. Sales tax revenue can certainly dip. It can fluctuate. But if you look back, and I don't think I have this slide in this deck, but if you look back over the last 15 years, probably about 15 years ago, we had over 10 million in interest. And then since then, it's been around $1 million a year because of the low interest rates. Interest rates are very high right now. So the interest is very high. I can't predict the future in terms of what interest rates and investment interest income is going to look like in 2-3 years. So when you look at the general fund, the general fund, 78 million of the 122 million is salaries. 14 million of the 122 million is benefits. So you're talking over 90 million. So almost 3/4 of the general fund budget is people. The transport, and it has probably over 1,200 people. Transportation has most of the cash. I'm just doing like a simple comparison. They only have 70 people. Almost all that money is for capital projects. You can delay a capital project. For the general fund, the way that you solve that problem, if you had to cut, you're cutting people. So to use interest earned to fund salaries is riskier than putting the interest for capital projects and capital. That's just my recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Madam Chair Sanchez. Items 3 and 4 seem germane to the conversation we're having now. Item 2 is more of a housekeeping thing. I didn't know if there are any presentations associated with items 3 and 4 that we may want to go over first. Okay, just checking because we're talking about these topics essentially all together.
Yeah.
Madam Chair Gums.
So do you have any other comments, sir?
Nope, just curious. if there's
Okay, okay.
presentations.
Yes, Ms. Gums.
Just wanna, I'm not gonna say anything else after this for this purpose here, but there were a couple of comments and this is why I'm thankful that everybody's talking because this is what we're supposed to do. So Mr. Ford and I had a wonderful conversation and he knew my dad. My dad was Sergeant Dave Gums, and this is kind of how it relates, right? So when we're talking about earned interest, what my dad used to tell me was never use your overtime to pay for your mortgage. And in my world, I earned overtime like constantly. I made a crap ton of money on overtime. But I listened to my dad. Don't use your overtime to pay your mortgage because you can't ever count on it. It's not always going to be there. And I relate that to the interest earned because we can't always count on it. When we're talking about paying people, that's just a horrible practice. I've heard it from a gazillion people, not a gazillion, but you hear what I'm saying. And also, it's reported that I'm pretty vocal about this tax issue. I'm vocal because my eagerness comes in.
Sorry.
It's okay. My eagerness is in forward thinking. So you're not supposed to plan for retirement when you're 70. You're supposed to plan for retirement when you're 30 and 40. We know that now. And I feel like my forethought isn't next year or the year after that or the year after that. It is, where are we going to be in 10 years? How are we going to get a government center? How are we going to do all of these things? Short-term thought, let's do it next year. That thought is not going to help us. And that's where my eagerness comes from. And I don't want anybody to misunderstand that. I'm not itching to raise anybody's taxes. What I'm itching to do is take care of our people and take care of our property so that the people in Kane County get the best of the best. And we haven't been doing that. We didn't do it last year. We didn't do it the year before. And as you know, I did not vote for those budgets. So I'm going to end this part of my comments on that because I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. And I'm really, really thankful that we're having this conversation because it's really nice to do it together.
Okay, very good. I'd like to be able to take a break, but Mr. Ford, if you have one more comment,
One-
let's
one more.
break for a few minutes because we can just get a little thought clearing. Yes, sir.
It's just that our biggest numbers, the numbers that really do us any good, is going to come from the property sales tax. If we do everything else first, our chances of the property sales tax is less.
We don't. I'm
Yeah,
I'm
good,
not
good,
arguing.
good.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
The only reason I'm saying is because that is, again, allocated special money that would come in that goes directly to, depending on how you would like to expend it, sir. We could do it for capital improvements. I believe informally, we've all talked that it would go directly to public safety. And that money would go directly to oversee public safety. And then it's a determination of how much you would like to levy that tax. Would it be 1/4% or a half a cent?
And one more thing is, sure, we can't, there's variance on the interest, but everything that's on that list of income has a variance on it. There's not one item up there that does not have a variance on how much the income is gonna be for next year, the year after, and the year after that. Every last one of those has a variance on the interest, on the income.
It's Sure.
Yes, and then we'll take a break.
Well, it's a budget. It has to have variance because we're trying to predict the future and we don't have a crystal ball. So everything will have.
Exactly. So everything has a variance, but when we talk about the variance on the interest, as if that's the only thing that has a variance on it. All I'm saying is everything up there has a variance on it. That's all I'm saying.
All right, so why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion for a recess for 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
30?
No.
Minutes? 15 minutes? 10 minutes?
Let's do 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Take a little break and come back.
10 minutes. Sorry, guys.
She says 30.
Yeah, you listen.
Yes.
I'll talk to you further, okay?
Those township, right? I mean, you can abolish.
Like the auditor.
In the recorder.
Kathy, but- Oh, she's back.
We should have the recording.
My question.
All right, everybody, let's get settled in. We're going to start, we're going to reconvene.
Money been incorporated into the.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Yes, we are going to, if we can get done at 5:30, I'll split it for 5:45. How about if are we in agreement to about 5:45? We can start bringing this to a close, about a half hour. Okay. All right, I'd like to reconvene, everybody. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Everybody, we're reconvening. Alan? Alan present by remote. Okay. Bates
Yes, or here, whichever you.
doing the roll call. Berman? Doherty?
Already here.
Davis?
Davis here.
Ford? Gums?
Comes here.
Iqbal? Juby?
To be here.
Kenyon?
Yes.
Caius?
Vice President.
Leonard? Not here. Lewis? Linder?
Sure, why not? Here.
Molina?
Molina present.
Roth?
Roth here.
Sanchez? Silva?
Silva's here.
Strathman? Surges? Tarver?
Carver's here.
Tepe?
Tepe here.
Okay, Williams?
Williams here.
Young?
Young here.
And Madam Pirag, you are here. You got a quorum.
We have a quorum. All right, so we blended property tax, reserves, and RTA sales tax. What has not yet been discussed, I believe, is fund consolidation. However, our state's attorney will need to go, but she would like to address us first. And then she needs to leave, and she wanted to give us some words about some very important matters.
I do, and I apologize, this is out of order, but I do unfortunately have to leave. One of the things that I know is important in terms of any type of a budget process that the board members are supposed to look at is the difference between mandated services and services that we provide that are not mandated. The last time that we've had a study on this was back in 2017. This is very much statutory based, and it is something that I would highly recommend at some point for this budget to readdress to see what we have to do as a county, especially when we are in a situation like we are now. And I really want to say that that's a difference between the unfunded mandates that sometimes our legislature sends to you. There are certain departments within this county that have to be here because by statute it has to happen. I will use my office as an example because by statute, we have to prosecute cases. By statute, we have to defend all of the county officials who may be involved in any type of litigation. The public defender's office, statutorily required. The circuit clerk's office, statutorily required. There are other departments that, again, I'm not advocating for this because I am not the policy decision maker here, and I like that I am not the policy decision maker. The health department is not a mandated service. That is not something that we have to provide. It's something that we're choosing to provide. Animal control, the only thing that we have to provide for that is rabies services, but that's not, all of the other services are not what we have to. Do I very much like these services that we provide here in Kane County? I do. But I think that for your purposes, I would be remiss if I didn't advise you all that this is one of the assessments you should do whenever looking at the budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions before I take off.
So you still stop for the baby ducks crossing the road, right?
All the time. I mean, I have video of it.
So it's just to review as I was taking notes, judicial, the courts, state's attorney, public defender mandated, the clerk, circuit, and the clerk
The county clerk.
Is mandated.
Those are all mandated, and I'm not including all the mandated ones because I have not reviewed the entirety of this.
Treasurer's mandated.
Treasurer's mandated.
Someone's got to collect the taxes. Any of our departments, we know roads mandate, just for keeping our roads in good repair. There's more.
There's more. I don't want you to think that was an exhaustive list. We haven't done a study.
Oh, absolutely.
Surges, I just want to make sure that, I mean, we've used this term undeaded, and scope creep and, mandates and I just want to make sure that my sentiment is coming across. If our tax levy has been at a particular rate and the scope creep has did that, if we're doing more, I'm not debating that. I'm not saying we shouldn't be, if that's what the quality of life is. But if at the time we did that, we never took into consideration what that might do to a budget, it's time to identify that. And I don't have any problem going to a resident and saying, listen, when you walk both ways uphill in the snow to get to school, and this is what we intended, but it's different now. And so if there is a difference, this is what it costs to have that difference. This is what it costs to live in the area that we want to live in. The Forest Preserve has been uber successful in saying we've had 2 referendums to buy as much land as they allowed us to. I believe that same methodology could be employed here to say, but this is everything that the county does. If we have to go back to our fixed budget, this is what we need to roll back with the monies we have. But if you'd like us to continue at this level or more, if we'd like a health insurance, a health department that is providing mental health at this level, understand it just costs, I'm sorry, what's the figure? $12, a year more. And if you're willing to do that, yay, let's go. And I don't want that to be confused with Cliff the curmudgeon trying to say, what was squeeze every out of a turnip, that we're not a turnip, but we do have to identify this is what that budget was based upon. And we are far beyond that. And it's time to make an adjustment. And that's my thought process on this, as feeble and as that is. So.
Not at all evil.
It's been time for a long time.
There's no wrong answer to any of this at all. No, yes, Ms. Juby.
So, Mr. Sturgis, I think that when the budgets were presented to each committee, it was based on the scope of services that they were already offering. And I think that the budget that we have this big shortfall with is not us expanding our services, and it's not us improving or, the scope creep. It's not that. Basically what it is it's trying to fund the services that we already offer. What we decide we want to do is a next year conversation starting in January about that budget. But the budget we're trying to do now is this is what our departments came through and told us that they needed to stay status quo pretty much with the services they offer. And we still are woefully short. So I think that is the conversation you have, that when you need to go to people, these are the services that we offer. We're not looking to expand our services. We're just looking to meet the services we're offering, and we still need more money. We don't have enough money.
I certainly understand that and respectfully disagree.
That's okay.
I'm just saying I need a baseline for that conversation.
I think our baseline is the budget that they submitted.
I understand what you're saying. And while that's easy and simplistic, if the budget that they've submitted is saying we are so above the baseline services that we're supposed to, then the question becomes, do we cut the services and bring them down? Or do we come up with more money to raise them up? Or is the money already there?
But I think what
If I'm mistaken on that,
Hopefully,
I'm interested. in
Commissioners, you
hearing.
should address your comments to the chair, not to each other.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes.
May I
We're
comment?
you two are debating each other right now.
Well, I'm not
Well, we're not-
debating. I'm just saying that, that I think that our constituents have come to expect a certain level of services based on what they had in the past. And for us to suddenly randomly decide to remove those services because they are a non-mandated thing. I think people would be very surprised to find out that they might not get salt on their road until the snow actually comes, or people might be very surprised to find out that there's no one there to pick up that stray dog. And I think that those are services that people take for granted because it's something we've always offered. That was all I was saying.
The previous boards have taken those steps. We are just reacting to previous boards' decisions.
Madam Chair Gums,
Yes, Ms. Gums, I do. and
should we
before-
let the state's
before-
attorney leave?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Sorry about that. I was so excited to leave, but I'll be
Ought to
available.
be.
Yeah, you're.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
You're mandated and you're leaving us.
You guys need me to jump on?
All right, very good.
Be safe out there on our
I
good,
would like-
well-kept roads.
We remember. Or a stray dog. By a stray dog. The one thing that we have got to focus on, and I understand that there's going to be additional conversation, which I'm sure is going to continue if allowed till much later in the day. But we need to talk about the fund consolidation, which has not yet truly been addressed at this point. So do not forget about that. Ms. Chuby?
So I make a motion that we do not discuss that because it is not required for the budget conversation. And given the amount of time that we have, I think that allocation of reserves and distribution of the RTA sales tax is very germane to what we're talking about.
It's obviously, you and Ms. Gums put together the agenda, I believe. So if you would like to remove.
I'll
that-
second.
Okay, all right. So we have a.
I didn't know we were voting while we was here on anything.
Do we,
What we're not going to talk about. This is a procedural
procedural vote right now?
vote as to what you're not going to discuss in what order.
Madam Chair, just before we don't discuss this, I'd like to discuss this because I think it was important that our director gave us an idea of how many funds are out there, which I think there were 124 separate funds that our department has to go through and see how much has been spent, how much is sitting in reserves. I think it's an important discussion because there might be money there that we can discuss and allocate to things that are more important than just sitting there collecting interest. So I think it's an important item to discuss. So I'd like to discuss it. It's on the agenda.
Yes.
Madam Chair, to that
Yes.
point, I believe Ms. Hopkinson discussed only two funds that were going to be consolidated, just for clarification.
Well, there's a couple different groups, the Public Safety, RTA Transit Fund and the Judicial Technology Fund are two funds that are funded with the RTA sales tax dollars in addition to the general fund and the Transportations Department's fund. The way that I have proposed handling it for 2024 is that those two funds, and they're overseen by the judiciary and by IT, they put together a budget. They did not budget to use all of the revenue that was incoming. So I budgeted to transfer the unbudgeted amounts back to the general fund. And historically, the Public Safety RTA Fund has been transferring anywhere from about $400,000 to $600,000 to the general fund from 2015 through 2021. They did that. So that's one group of funds. The other group of funds that I have proposed to consolidate.
Hold on,
are the
we're
reserves.
talking about the funds
Yes,
right
we
now.
are, we are.
So,
I just
but
have,
we-
I
we
just
a
have a
motion and
simple,
a second
yeah,
right now.
okay.
Let's take care of business.
Just, may I respond really quick to her
Well,
answer?
let's get done with
We'll never
business
get
first.
out of here.
All right,
Never.
please, just hold on a second.
Well, I have to say this because Fund 127, the state's attorney indicated she needed to rule on.
Correct.
So that's why I thought it was important that we have a conversation and you guys have decided not to have a conversation. So maybe withdraw your second and we can actually have a conversation about what's on the agenda.
Would you like to withdraw that?
I will withdraw my second.
Ms. Juby, withdraw?
As the person who set up the agenda, this doesn't have anything to do with, never mind, I'll withdraw.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All right. We have the beginning of discussion. Now, would you like,
Yeah, I just have a question. I think it's with the funds. The question is, do we feel like we need more money in our reserve funds, I mean, in our capital project? Do we feel like we need more money in our capital project? And do we feel like we need more money in our reserve funds for the capital, for our general budget?
Well, the,
Have a chart. Do you have?
I had it, it's gone now.
Oh, can we?
So, the capital projects fund is funded for next year, for 2024, to complete the projects that they have on their 2024 schedule.
And Roger did send out that presentation that he presented. So look in your email for those
Oh, he
documents.
sent it out.
But if they actually complete every single one of those projects next year in 2024, they will have no money left in their capital projects fund. And so if you look at the schedule for 2025, they need 8.2 million. For 2026, they need 8 million. For 2027, they need 7.4 million. For 2028, they need 6.5. And, presumably this list would go on from year to year. I think a lot of this is projects that have been delayed for many years. And so it's a catch up to tackle a lot of projects.
Okay,
So
so-
that money has to come from somewhere, and it would have to come from the general fund.
Okay.
Unless there's a grant or something else that the county received.
All right. So as those funds, first of all, I don't believe that all of them are going to get spent down next year. I don't want to quote what Roger's saying, but we do have to allocate those funds. But as far as the way projects been going with waiting on material and timeline to bid them out, they will be allocated for next year, but I don't think they're going to get spent down next year. So 2024 is going to bleed into 2025, and that's normal for construction and repairs.
Probably.
So as those funds get spent down, yes. And as those funds get spent down, money is coming in from somewhere else. So if we can figure out that balance, and I know it may be complicated, but my point is that if we have enough for projects for the next couple of years, and our general fund, the reserve that we need in there that we talked about, that Leonard always talked about and very cautious about, is do we or do we not make that part of our base when we talk about what we need and do not need as far as income funds? No question.
Can you say that question again?
I didn't understand it either, Rod.
So if we have money set aside for capital projects and we have enough reserves, especially with the capital, with our general budget, do we not look at that as far as our base, what we start to work from, is to figure out what we need for the next year? And you just talked about the year after, but I think right now we're just looking at next year. And I know the year after is important, but I think that's where the sales tax come in at, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, since we have a capital plan, you have to look at how do you fund it? And right, the county board can decide, right, on these projects. And yes, the way that I see it, the way that it has worked over time is the general fund is sending money over to the capital projects fund every year to help fund a set of projects. And that would be expected to continue. And it would come, yes, because the reserve accounts that I talk about all the time, the special reserve, the emergency reserve, the property tax freeze protection reserve, the COVID payroll reimbursement reserve, they're all considered general fund accounts. They're just sub accounts. So they're basically holding excess reserves. They're holding money in excess of what we are required. So the 90-day requirement is there for emergencies. That's why government set a reserve. We set 90 days for emergencies. We have more than we need for our emergency. We have right now over $50 million in excess of what we need. That could be, yes, that could be put to use for the capital projects fund. We're dipping into it this year and next year's budget to fund our general fund. But if we keep increasing expenses and our revenue base doesn't substantially change, we're eating away at those reserves.
Was that 50 some, is that based on 180 days or the 90?
90,
That's moving to
90.
90 days, okay.
And
Right, again, our current county financial policies, if you go online, they say 90 days. They say 90 days. I just want to amend our budget policy to be in line with that.
And as a general reminder, if you can reflect on this year's budget, it was forecasted that we had $17 million we borrowed out of reserves that, and we said that we would consider replenishing those. We did not use all of that. We used what, 9 million?
Well, my forecast is that we'll use about 7 million of it.
About $7 million. But it's still $7 million used of reserve that could be used for something else. So for instance, when we talk about the interest earned, that could be replenishing what was taken away.
Right.
Because that's what we had discussed last year, that we were going to replenish those reserves. But now if we're not going to replenish those, we keep on whittling down on the amount that we have, and pretty soon you're not going to have any. I mean, and I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that you're going to be down to a zero.
And just also, because I had someone ask a question during the break, for the 2024 budget, the $12 million that the treasurer's office is forecasting for interest earned. Oh, wait, right there. All $12 million of this is in the 2024 budget. We have budgeted all $12 million. It's in the budget. When you see the budget tomorrow, you will see interest investment income in all the funds across the county for $12 million.
The interest has been spent.
Well, it's budgeted as a revenue line item. Yeah, it's in the budget.
So it's not like we're hoping.
Yes.
And the general fund gets, 1.6. And the reserves get like 700,000.
So it's not just, and
Oh, man.
just for clarification, that money's already been allocated. It's not additional 12
So,
million.
so we are not sitting like little misers on that $11 million. It's being used.
Well, it's part of the budget. It's part of the budget.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, the transportation department is happy to be getting that interest earned, which they can use for capital projects, for road and bridge projects. The ARPA money, it's yet to be determined how ARPA is going to use that
So
interest
we
earned.
are using the interest as part of the budget for next. year.
Yes, it's in the budget. It's in the budget. It's in the budget.
Kathy, 100% of that is what you said?
100% of that 12 million is
Yep.
in the budget.
And point out that only 1.6 million goes to
Right.
the general fund.
Right. Because the general fund, again, just think of a simple allocation, a percent to total. The transportation department has 17 funds and they have over $100 million. Actually more than that. It could be like 131 million. So when you take 12 million and allocate it to all the funds in the county, it goes to where the money is. It's a simple, yeah.
The rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
All right, we've got some questions. Ms. Molina?
Ms. Hopkinson, so based on that, is that a policy that the interest needs to remain in those departments? Or is that something we have to do, or is that something that we choose to do? Because I'm not sure about the ARPA that there's 4.2 million, it looks like. Does that need to stay in the ARPA account, or is that now general fund use?
So that's something that we're still looking into. We're asking questions on how the ARPA interest earned can be used. We're still looking into that, whether it has to be used for ARPA eligible type projects or whether it can be used for anything.
What about the transportation? Because that's about the amount of our RTA split. If we get their interest versus their RTA split, I'm not sure if
Right.
that's something that's.
one could argue that the interest earned for some of the accounts like motor fuel tax, local option motor fuel tax, whether you can take the interest earned off of that pooled cash. There's probably other restricted funds in the county where you could probably that are under the auspices of an elected official. You could probably argue whether or not, but there probably are some other funds in the county where it could be moved, but I don't have the list off the top of my, I haven't investigated every single one.
I think that's important for us to know as a county board, what is available to us that doesn't have to be department specific when we're looking at the larger scale of whether we're going to increase taxes or whether there is actual interest sitting there that isn't being used right now and that can be used to fund our salaries and capital projects.
And that, to my understanding, if I may, the ARPA funds, because at DuPage County, just using reference from DuPage County, when we met with them, their ARPA interest funds are discretionary. That's how they're viewing it. I can't say that that's okay for Kane County, but that they're using that separately as a discretionary fund. And as far as transportation, when I talked to Tom, who's sitting right over here, and obviously he can clarify, he has already used that money for future needs for transportation. So that money has been allocated. Is that correct, Tom?
When we look at the financial plan, the 5-year financial plan that's been adopted, those monies have been allocated for projects that take 2-3 years to come to completion. So it is something that is being utilized at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Question, Madam Chair,
Yes.
for
yes.
Mr. Rickard, are there any provisions in the grants agreements that require the interest to be essentially retained for the projects?
Yeah, I think that as far as the funding agreements, I can't answer that question. I think we would need to look at, if you're looking at like motor fuel tax, if you're looking at the local option, as the finance director mentioned, there's certain fund sources that at least I've always been under the understanding that they are restricted fund sources. The interest for motor fuel tax has to remain in the motor fuel tax fund. But that's something that I don't want to be a legal expert on, so.
Okay, Ms. Juby?
So I just want to clarify to make sure I understood correctly. All of the interest income earned that was the bonus interest was put across everyone. Some got more than others. Is there anything prohibiting us from removing that from one place and using the money for something else? So instead of taking the RTA money and making them whole through the interest or through the gas tax or however we're doing it, we put the money in their fund. Can we also not take it away from their fund?
Well, that's what I was just talking, the motor fuel tax.
I'm not talking about the motor fuel tax. I'm talking about the interest income that Bill Leonard brought up that you said was distributed to each of the accounts. Transportation getting the most because they're the largest account. Is there anything prohibiting us from taking that interest money out of one account and giving it to an account that maybe needs more money?
I think that's what we were talking about in terms of, are there restrictions? I mean, the allocation, I believe, if I understand it, is based upon what's in the fund. The reason transportation gets the lion's
Right.
share is that they have the lion's share of the cash balance, and it reflects that. So if there is a restriction on the interest, as there is in the case of the balances in the MFT fund, it has to go there. Your question, I think, would be more, I think it is, are there funds where the interest is not required to be allocated to that fund and can be swept into something else?
Correct.
Well, I would say like I'm just looking at the list. The capital projects fund is just a fund that the county created itself to isolate the capital projects away from the general fund. So that would be something that's wouldn't be restricted, but that would be that would be a fund that would be ideal to receive interest because it's capital projects. The health department, they do have a property tax levy. They have about $2 million. They have grant revenue. They have permit revenue. I don't know that there's anything that would, I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't researched this, but my concern for MFT and local MFT for the transportation departments are because MFT is a state tax and it's in a separate fund. I would be hesitant to move the interest earned that is deposited back into that state motor fuel tax fund. I would be hesitant to move that interest earned. The local option, the same thing. But there are probably some funds that fit into both categories, some that I would not want to move out of that fund and some that I would think would be okay.
Yes, Mr.
So basically, we need to have the state's attorney weigh in on those funds, correct? On whether, I mean, we can't go any farther with this conversation because it's all unknowns. We don't know.
It's similar to the consolidation issue that was raised earlier, is that is it proper to sweep the consolidated funds into the general fund
Right.
that I think Ms. Musser said was already being looked at?
Correct.
So we do not have that information tonight, which
Not-
is,
Not with the clarity that you're
which is
asking.
why I had suggested we don't talk about this.
But it's important for
today.
us to have it on public view. You might have known that, but everybody listening to this now is
And I
aware of where we're
apologize.
at.
I apologize for not making that clear. I'm very sorry.
I think it was a very good conversation, but if you take a look and I'm just doing quick math. If we remove transportation, and then take a look at, IMRF is pretty substantial. Whether or not that has to stay where it's at or not, that I can't answer. But everything else is pretty modest except for ARPA. And ARPA is dwindling fund. And we know that that is not a sustainable fund because that money is going out the door. So there'll be less invested money because it's doing what it needs to do. It has to go out in 2 years. So again, this is you can sweep, I'm sure, some of this money, but it's a finite resource. It's not going to continue on because it's taken some time for that to build. Okay. So you all have, I see a pause right now.
think you wore them all out.
Well, they're all coming down from the sugar how you fed them.
Good pie. Do you have a question? Just, that was the pie. All right, so tomorrow, finance? Wednesday, finance. That's what I thought. I don't know why I heard somebody say
Jane,
tomorrow.
just-
Just checking my own date.
Question, I'm not sure which of these points it goes to, but in Mr. Leonard's absence, I just want to revisit
Hmm.
we had a brief discussion about the sales tax and a referendum and whether it was germane to this year's or not. And I submit that it is always going to be germane. It's a discussion that we've begun many times over many years and kind of run into the same problem. It's like, well, that doesn't fix anything right now. So then it gets put back on the shelf, which doesn't ever get us one bit closer. So part of my question, I guess, or the question is, and maybe Mr. Sepro can help in the absence of Ms. Mosser. What do we have to do to put that in motion now? I understand that there will be a delay in the return, but the numbers involved are greater than the total.
You're talking about the
It's on that
sales
screen right
tax
there for
referendum.
interest. Yeah,
Basically, the board would have to adopt a resolution submitting the form of the question, which you may recall from a couple of years ago.
Last year.
You know, you have to pick which topic you want to devote the sales tax revenue to. If it passes, you have a menu, but you can only do one at a time.
Correct.
So you would have to do that in time to put it on the March primary ballot, you would have to act, I think the deadline is
December.
near the end of December, the beginning of January, but I'd have to check. that.
There's the discussion I wish we'd start having
Well,
right now,
if I-
because the income projected from that is substantial.
If you would all like to have just a brief summary, I'd be happy to provide that summary for you because I've been doing the homework. So here, there's the resolution of the board passing it is, I'm going to say the easy part. Obviously, it's difficult, thoughtful discussion, but it's a yay or nay vote. If you would like to have it on the March primary, absolutely correct. We have to have it voted upon December. However, and this is the big however, there's a big back end of it. Before we even go out, it has been suggested that we go through a poll to make sure that this is something of interest to our voters. After that, it was spoken about at the last time we discussed this at the last year's board meeting, that there'd be a lot of information that would have to be given out to the constituents. For those of you who have passed a school board referendum or any kind of referendum such forest preserve district, some of you participated. There's an awful lot of marketing that has to go with it and voter interest, which would mean that a separate PAC would have to be formed that has nothing to do with the county, who could raise the appropriate amount of funds if you'd like to do a mailing, if you'd like to do yard signs, people to go out to talk to voters about it. That would all have to be separate from all of you because the government cannot pay for that. We are allowed as a government agency, as government representatives, to place and say, this is what it is with no persuasion at all. So you can't be in publicly, you can't be yay or nay. These are the facts of what this would take care of. However, whether or not you feel that that would be appropriate to put it onto the March primary is truly up to the board's discretion and discussion. You can have it, you can take some time to do the polling, which will cost approximately more than $2,000 to do an appropriate polling. So again, private funds would have to be pulled forth with that to be able to get that. So there'd be an opportunity for that to happen. But you can put it up on the ballot at no cost, just by your vote, and get an idea of what the public would feel. But if you would like to promote it in any way, that is not the job of this body. That's a separate entity. That's the Friends of Kane County.
I just would submit that it offers a solution that doesn't require going to the levy or to the motor fuel tax. It's substantially more money than either of those.
I believe though that if it passed, well, I don't think it would go into effect for the current year. It would have to go.
No, I
into
don't think it
effect
would
for the
either.
year. Yeah.
All the more reason the sooner you get started, the sooner you can collect it.
So we can present.
If all we ever do is just talk about it and not actually take the action, we'll never collect it.
I can present that to you in December at the December board meeting, which is in a timely manner because we're almost to November. And you can take a vote on it, yes or no. And then you can get started with everything else. If that is your will. But I want to make sure, perhaps at another discussion on exactly what you'd like to go for, because you do have 3 options. Okay, there's nothing else? All good?
Move we adjourn till the 14th of November. Turn your lights on when you go home.
Have a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.